deck up to share. I will introduce our panelists today. Thank you everyone for joining us to talk about the GMAT Focus edition. I think it's a really, like I said, a very timely topic, and it's important, I think, to give everyone the information that can help them, sort of plan and make decisions about this. So joining us today is Bara, founder and CEO of City Test Prep and Mindflow Speed Reading. She's an internationally recognized expert in high performance coaching, personal empowerment, and transformative test preparation. So I've known Bara for a long time, and I have there's lots more qualifications she has and degrees and all kinds of things. But I guess this is just to say that, lots and lots of test prep. There are a lot of test prep providers out there, but Bara is one who really has sort of gone really deep into specializing in, helping people get through the test in a way that's the most sort of, I won't say easy, but comfortable. So you can say more about that, Bara. But for now, that's Bara Sapir. And I also like to introduce Dr. Karen Van Hook, who is a linguist and has taught at many universities for the past 9 years, and is also at the University of Michigan. She's published books and articles on English grammar, and she's written test materials for Kaplan and tutored a lot on all kinds of standardized testing. So Karen is the a verbal expert, and she's the author of a book called Full Potential GMAT Sentence Correction Intensive, published by Nova Press. So I hope I've done justice to both of your amazing qualifications and career trajectories, and we will move on to the next slide if we can. Vedant? Yeah, so just a little bit about the Red Pen. I'm Kim Dixit, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Red Pen. We're a global education consultancy. We have a whole stable of consultants who support applicants in their MBA application journey. Our consultants come from the top 20 business schools. We have dedicated consultants for each applicant, but we also have a team-based approach. So you get sort of essays, you get essay specialists, you get resume specialists, you get interview, letter of recommendation. You have specialists for all kinds of different components of the application process. And so we we make sure that, everyone on the team is sort of weighing in on each application. So we do really sort of intensively deploy the team-based approach in MBA application support. So the next slide, please. And this is our track record. It really sort of speaks for itself, and we've been supporting MBA applicants for the last 11 years. And so I think these statistics are from the scholarship number is from the past admission cycle, but the other numbers are, sort of cumulative. Next slide, please. Okay, and these are the kinds of programs that we support applicants with. We actually will support applicants with any MBA application, and but these just happen to be some of the highlights. I also like to say that the Red Pen does support applicants through all the way from boarding school, undergraduate applications, MBA, postgrad, and basically anywhere in the in the education journey. Okay, next slide, please. All right, we don't need this one. We can let Bara and Karen take over and sort of discuss with us the main sort of highlights about the new GMAT Focus edition. So I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much, Kim and the Red Pen, for having us. I've been in test prep since 1992. And the first two tests that I taught were the GMAT and the GRE. And I taught this over on South University at the University of Michigan campus in Ann Arbor. So this is a test that's really near and dear to my heart. And Karen and I are colleagues and friends, and she's been the head verbal tutor for the City Test Prep since 2005, when I opened up the company it as a company, not just as a solopreneur. So I want to just talk a little bit about the GMAT Focus as a new test and also as an old test, right? They've repurposed a lot of the material that's on there. So I just want to go through it really quick because I know, Kim, you've got a bunch of questions for us that we can go over. So a lot of this information you can get on the GMAT Focus page itself on the GMAT site. It is changing rapidly. So if you get on there, you're going to see that over time, you're going to get more and more information. It's actually changed since I've given a talk with MBA Waves. I'm a host on that program. It's a weekly vidcast on LinkedIn. People can sign up for it. And we just talked about it and things have changed even since then a couple of weeks ago. So let me share this. And I also encourage people to ask questions. I think that Manik, you could probably field that. So let's go through here. So the most interesting thing, one of the most interesting things that I find is that they've made a name change. The current GMAT is just the GMAT, but they've turned it into the GMAT Focus. And I don't know of them doing that in the past, or I don't remember them doing that. And I think that really speaks to two things that a test taker should think about. One is that it's great because it's positive reinforcement that you should focus, but it's also them letting you know that the test is more focused. And you'll see as I go through some of these changes that they've really reduced the time and the kinds of questions. They've really honed in on it. So I wish I was a fly in that room when they were talking about the name change. I do think, and I've talked with colleagues about this, that they might drop Focus once it's the only test that is available. It might just become the GMAT, but I like it. I mean, I think that Focus is a great name. I'm curious. What do you think, Kim? Do you like the name Focus?
Yeah, I agree, actually. Yeah, it's cool. Hmm.
Okay, so there's a lot of overlap in the material that is being provided. So right now, the GMAT is going to be available until June 24, but they're going to be rolling out the new GMAT Focus early in autumn. So right now, I haven't seen legitimate material that's out there yet, but because there is this overlap, you can look at what you're actually performing well in, and you can decide once it's rolled out, which test that you want to take. Both are computer adaptive. The current one takes a total of 3 hours and 7 minutes, 187 minutes. The new one is reduced by almost an hour. So it's about 2 hours and 15 minutes at 135 minutes. The current has 4 sections: quant, verbal reasoning, IR, and analytical writing, or we call the AWA. The new edition has quant, verbal, and something called data insights. And we're going to talk about how data insights is actually a combination of kind of like critical reasoning and integrated reasoning and data sufficiency, which they've pulled out of the math section. So this is just the breakdown of the time. What's interesting is that in the new GMAT Focus, you have 3 sections that are for each 45 minutes each, whereas prior you had the AWA, the writing section, and the IR 30 minutes, and those were scored differently and not part of your cumulative score. Whereas now, these 3 scores that are each 45 minutes each, these 3 sections, are actually going to be combined to be 1 score out of 800. So that's actually a big change. So before, when we were preparing students, not as much time went into the integrated reasoning because it would just be a score from up to 6. And people were just we weren't convinced that folks were actually looking at that. It was just sort of like, are you at a 4, 5, or 6? And that's all you really needed to be at. Now, all of that information is being put into your cumulative score. Currently, you have the order that you can take it. You can take the AW and IR, and then you can take the actual multiple choice part of the test, or take the multiple choice part of the test, and then the writing and the integrated reasoning. Now, those 3 sections, you can take it in whatever order you want. So that's also a change. And I wanted to just get into that section change a little bit more. This is probably the biggest change that I can see, is that this combines, like I said, integrated reasoning, data sufficiency questions, because they wanted to have a way to calibrate your digital and data literacy. So that's something to just really flag. In the data insight section, you have this multi-source reasoning, table analysis, graphics interpretation, and 2-part analysis. So interestingly, because they didn't really have this before, this is really testing real world business applications. So before it was just kind of the toes in the water with the integrated reasoning. Now it's full on, a full section. The other thing that's still important is reading comprehension, because sentence correction is no longer part of it. Up until a couple weeks ago is all speculation, because on, I believe, GMAT Club, they found a table of contents page on Amazon. It's since been taken down, but now on the GMAT site itself, it does say that there is no data sufficiency, but reading comprehension is important. And I have here a QR code, because what's important with reading comp is it's not only being able to understand what's being said, it's being able to do it in a timely manner. And if American spoken English, American formal English is not your native language, then you want to be able to read in the most comprehensive way where you comprehend the most. And Karen, maybe you could talk about it, but this is a free speed read assessment to see how fast you're reading. And if you're reading slower than 300 words a minute at an 80% comprehension, you're going to want to bolster that, right? So you can take this speed assessment, and maybe Kim, you can get this to folks after we talk.
Yes.
So currently, the GMAT consists of the multiple choice and the written essay. The new is eliminating the written essay completely, and you're only going to have multiple choice questions. And currently, it has sentence correction and geometry. The new one, it says may not, but actually they don't have sentence correction, they don't have geometry, and they don't have data sufficiency specifically at all in the quant section. So this goes into the number of questions. This is just data points to understand how many questions are here. The verbal went from 36 questions to 23 questions, quant 31 questions to 21 questions, and the data insight has 20 questions. And remember, each of those sections are 45 minutes each. And changing answers is a really also amazing thing that they've integrated. Now you can't change your answer. You do a question, you go on to the next one. You can't look back, can't do anything like that. Now you can bookmark questions, and you can go back as much as you want, look at everything you've done already, and you have 3 answers per section that you can actually change. So that's actually another big, you could consider it a plus, but you can also consider it, our first answer is usually the correct one. So it also puts into place, are you going to trust your first question? Mm-hmm. The current GMAT scoring is verbal reasoning is 0 to 51. There's and quant 0 to 51, and then 200 to 800. The new, like I said, combines all of them to be at an 800. There's no more AWA and IR. The AWA was 0 to 6. The IR was 0 to 8. We don't have that anymore. And sending score reports, but now you can actually, those are incorrect. You can actually send a score report for free, and with the GMAT Focus, now for an additional fee, you can send it. And we'll talk more about resources. These are 2 QR codes to go to Mindflow Speed Reading, which can get your reading speed to be beyond 300. It can double it. You can go up to 5 times faster. And then also a QR code to the city test prep site, because we do one-on-one private tutoring. And I think we're ready to answer some questions. I don't know if Karen, you want to jump in to talk about, we don't have questions from the test to really give meaty answers yet. They haven't revealed those yet, but I think a lot of it's going to be the same that we've seen up till now. Do you agree, Karen?
Yeah, I think it's highly likely that when they're keeping the reading comp, and at least according to the website, critical reasoning also, they're just cutting sentence correction. And having seen how this test has evolved over all these years, I think it's extremely likely that the reading comprehension, the critical reasoning, things like that, it's going to be the same as what we've seen before. Yeah. Or at least very close. We'll see.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Bara, we have one question in the chat. I don't know if you can see it, but anyway, and it's actually a question that I had when you were talking about the changing answers. Adit is asking, how would an adaptive test work if I change my answers? So do you know?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
That's an amazing question. And what I will do is I will reach out to GMAT and see if I can find the answer and get back to you on that. I don't know. I think it's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, if the idea is the way you answer a particular question determines the next question you get, but you then skip that question, I guess it just assumes that you didn't have that question.
Well, I don't know. That's a good question too. I don't know if you can skip a question and leave it blank and go to the next question.
Or you can just bookmark it.
I think you can bookmark it. So I think that brings up a really important point because I can't. Yeah, I think it's a great question. You're admitted. You're admitted to business school.
Just to get to your question.
Well, presumably that's part of why they limit it to 3 of them. Maybe you can only change up to 3. Maybe there's a limit to how much they can recalculate the whole thing too. I don't know.
Right. I have a question. When you were talking about the scoring, is it, I mean, maybe audience will be familiar with this, but is it like the ACT where everything is scored out of 800 and then it's averaged on 800?
It's interesting. The current GMAT is weighted differently, right? And
right.
It's weighted so that verbal actually carries more weight.
Correct.
And there is actually no information out about how they're going to calculate those scores yet. I haven't seen anything yet. So we're going to have a part 2 of this when it's actually put out, because it's not clear. My guess is that they have some way of figuring out what's going to be important and how they're going to give that information out. I don't know if they're just going to give one score or you're going to see the weighted 3 scores. I don't know.
Right.
There's a lot of mystery still. We're timely, but it's definitely mysterious. They just, like I said, they keep on putting out like little drips of information.
Okay. Okay, this next question, I think you answered this at the beginning, but maybe it's worth repeating. Will the new GMAT replace the current one, or can both be taken? So what's the timeline like again?
So the timeline is that the new one is going to be made available sometime this fall. No date has been given. They're gonna roll it out, probably because they need to have an overlap between the 2 tests, because as much they've tested these questions, but I think that they need to do that. And the old test is sunsetting June of 24. So if someone is not super comfortable with the newness of what this test is about, you have till June of next year to take the old test, because this test is not going to be easier. This test is not, like, just because it's shorter, just because they're getting rid of some sections or sentence correction, it might be easier for some people, but by and large, they're not making a test to make it easier. They have to have the same breakdown of scores. Not everyone can go in and get an 800, right? Yeah. So what a person taking the test has to think about is, who are they in these different sections and what's going to give them the best advantage.
Okay. I think you've sort of said this, that basically because it's so new, there's no sort of practice material out there, etc. But the question is, is there any material that for which people can prepare for the data insight section? But I think your answer will be not yet.
Well, actually, a lot of the material that's currently available, especially through GMAT, is perfectly valid to use, right? But you don't want to use the geometry. You don't want to use the sentence correction. It might be useful to make sure that you do understand formal English, right? Formal American English, because that's probably going to be kind of part of the test, but you're not going to be tested on it. So yeah, you can use all of the current GMAT material because most of it's going to be on there, just no data, like no geometry and no sentence correction, essentially.
Okay, but this data insights is not going to be dramatically different, as far as you know.
Well, it has more oomph to it. That's a technical term, by the way. And it's become such an important part of the test that you're still going to want to understand. You're not going to have specific data sufficiency, but it is baked into it.
Got it.
So, if you really want to see the large view, like just the real far view, this is a test of reasoning. This is a test of logic. This is a test. They're not testing whether you know algebra and can teach it. They want to know if you can apply the concepts to a business mindset.
Got it.
Right. And so everything that you could do, like even Wordle, right, is going to help your brain to make the leaps and jumps. Even if you do the LSAT, use LSAT material, you're not going to see things on the test like, the critical reasoning, yes, but it's really about how your mind works. And I think that GMAT wants to refine, and the business schools want to refine more and more. Do you have the way of thinking as a business professional? Can you take a lot of information, bring it together to come up with a logical conclusion and support it? Karen, do you want to talk a little bit about the verbal and how the verbal does that?
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say is, people often ask, like, what is a common mistake that people make when they're prepping for the GMAT? And I think the answer to that is going to be highly likely to be the same, even with this new edition. And that is, number one, it's a mistake to try to cram, like to try to do like prep in a weekend, because what you want to do is develop these skills of understanding and reasoning. In other words, this isn't a test of whether you know particular facts or anything like that. It's a test of your ability to reason logically. Um, Another thing is that, and I think this will probably continue to be true in the new edition. We'll wait and see, but it's always been this way. Um, the verbal section in particular, that's the section I'm the most familiar with, but I think this is true throughout the whole test. There's an element to it that is getting used to the way in which they frame questions. So, like with reading comp, sometimes people make the mistake of getting completely bogged down in irrelevant details or thinking that they need to understand every single sentence of the passage, but that often isn't required. What they're looking for is whether you can make logical connections between ideas. And the way that the sentences or the questions are phrased, they're often pointing you to a particular part of the passage. And there's a way that you can find the information that you need to make the logical connection if you look in the right place. So, for instance, common mistake is sort of looking all over the passage as if this were a literary analysis question or a general question in an English class or something like that, but it isn't. They're looking for a particular kind of reasoning that is closer to the kind of reasoning you'll do when you're reading contracts or evaluating business plans. And I think this is going to continue to be true, is that what you need is you need some time to absorb how to learn how to think more logically this way and to get used to applying it to the kinds of questions and passages that they put in.
Great. Yeah, that's really helpful. Sounds like, from what I can gather from what you're both saying, is that don't be so concerned that there's not exact preparation material for this test, but rather, kind of think about the sort of think about it more conceptually. Is that correct?
Well, I would say there is material in the sense that what's available now through GMAT and prior tests that they have on their website, a lot of that is going to be applicable. The majority, 80 to 90% of it, you can use to study. But even if this new test didn't exist, that you still want, it's still a reasoning test. It was never not a reasoning test.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it's not that anyone is going to be impressed if you have the exact equation to do exponents, because the exponents are almost a metaphor of something else. And so it's really being able to have business thinking literacy, a kind of reasoning. And if you want to take the new one, if you decide I'm doing, or if you know that you're going to be doing this in a year or two, and that's what, then start with the material that's available. There will be material, I have no doubt, soon, and it's going to look a lot like the material. They're going to repurpose the material they have now and add a little bit more to it. But again, it's the thinking skills. So they've actually moved a little bit more towards what the LSAT does, which is that there's nothing to memorize. You just have to apply the skill sets to the prompts that they're giving you. Now, granted, yes, you need to know arithmetic and algebra, but you don't need to know geometry, because for whatever reason, they've determined that what the spatial reasoning that you need to know in geometry is no longer a necessary tool, or it no longer measures what they want for a business school applicant. Now, the executive assessment, this test actually might look more like the executive assessment test, because that also doesn't have geometry, for example. So that's also material you can use, but it's more expensive to use EA material than it is GMAT material. And you use GMAT material to study for the executive assessment.
Interesting.
Yeah, I concur, because every time they make a so-called major change, there's always a huge amount of repurposing. And so people can be working on absorbing the mental skills and the mindset that this test is looking for by using already existing material, and then see what new material they put out for the data insights section and so forth.
I have a couple of questions on the chat. One is particularly asking, will CR, I guess critical reasoning questions, appear in verbal as well as data analysis? Do you know?
From my understanding, yes, they are going to appear in the verbal section. And the way that they appear in the data insights, I don't think is going to be as straightforward. I think they're going to have a different format. So even though they're drawing from the skill sets and reasoning, they're not going to be as direct as they are in the verbal. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, their website, they keep updating the website, as Bara mentioned, but the most recent iteration does list critical reasoning as part of the verbal section. So we just have to go by what they're announcing, and that's what they're saying. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay, and one more question for the quant section. Will it be just problem solving and no data sufficiency questions at all? So only PS and no DS?
That's what they are reporting, that it's only going to be the problem solving, and that the data sufficiency has migrated over to the data insights section. But again, I don't think it's going to look anything like the data sufficient. I don't think they're just going to have a data sufficiency question. I think it's going to be integrated in a different way, but you're going to use the same thinking, or it might be part of a larger question. I think it's super interesting that they moved it out of the quant section, frankly, because and it always was reasoning anyway, because you never had to get an answer at the end of it. It was always, do you have sufficient information to answer this?
Thank you. I think that helps. I have a question. I don't know if you have the answer, but do you have any, I think I'm getting a sense from what you've said already, but do you have any idea why GMAT has decided to change this test?
Well, I know we're being recorded, but there's two things that I have to say about it. One is that as much as the student is the consumer of the GMAT, ultimately it's the business schools that are needing the information. And they must have gotten some message from GMAT that they wanted to have a test that was measuring things in a little bit in a different way. And because the GMAT for many years was the only test that business schools accepted, that they somehow they wanted it to change a certain way. Now, like I said, this is being recorded, but I will put this down for posterity that the GRE and other tests have been accepted at all of these other schools now. You know, some schools even accept the MCAT, some accept the LSAT. You know, and so now that the GRE initially, when it was first, the GRE is a much more general test, right? And now that it's accepted into business schools, I think they got a lot of the market share. And I think that this is a great business decision by GMAT, not only to have like new and improved GMAT Focus, right? I think it's a branding and marketing solution for them as well. And we actually spoke with some folks from ETS about it, and they were pretty surprised that there wasn't a writing section, because the writing on the test is really the only time that the schools can see someone writing in real time without being able to polish the essay. And GRE still has that writing section. So the ETS folks that we spoke with thought it was really interesting and pretty edgy that they took off the writing section.
Especially now with ChatGPT, and everybody can now write everything else from chat. It's an interesting situation. Karen, anything to add to that before I ask my next question?
No, that's really that's exactly what I think it is now that the GRE and sometimes other tests are in the ring, and the business schools are getting a sense of what measures work for them, and then there's competition for getting students to choose these tests. I think there's a lot of reasons for the GMAT to decide to focus in a particular way.
But along those lines, do you think that if, like you're saying, you know, if this test is now kind of more testing the skills, so to speak, or the way of thinking, or a conceptual way of thinking that is more businessy, do you think that students who have, let's say, consultants or, you know, more business related experience will do better on this test? Do you think this is going to be a test that they can sort of more easily sort of understand what's being asked? I don't know if that's...
I mean, ultimately, if they're good at business, right? I mean, just because you have a job in a certain arena doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, you've had more practice with it. You know, the people who are applying to business school, and this applies to people applying to law school also, like some people have a proclivity to thinking a certain way. Other people might not be as fluent in thinking that way, but all of these tests are coachable. And ultimately, if you want to go into business, you actually want to have these skills, right? So gaining these skills are not only going to help you on the test, they're also going to help you in school and in your career. So if you see yourself as a business leader, this is a great place to start, is really understanding how to move through the test. And I think some people, are going to have an easier time, but I mean, it's interesting because if we look at sentence correction, which won't be on this test, but even Native American English speakers had problems with sentence correction. I mean, it's not like just because they were native speakers that the verbal section was a breeze. It absolutely wasn't. And so there was this thought, if folks they weren't Native American English speakers, that they were at some sort of disadvantage. That wasn't really always the case, because some folks who are reading, you know, People magazine as their main source of reading they might have a problem with the verbal section.
Yeah, and I think there's always two components to this. That on the one hand, I always think of it in terms of two levels. On the one hand, there are these general critical thinking skills and business skills that they are testing, and and it's very easy to see. You can draw like a straight line from what the test is doing to the kinds of things that a person actually has to do in an MBA program or as a business manager. You know, this test isn't just busy work or a hurdle to jump over. It really is testing thinking in the way that the program you're applying to needs you to think. But
Mm,
there's another side to it too, which is getting used to the particular way that the GMAT gets at these skills. And that is part of what makes it really coachable, as Bara said. Um, what that means is it's not that there are quick shortcuts or silly little tricks in order to guess the right answer. It isn't like that. But that when they ask a question, there's a particular way to approach it that will enable you to find the answer much more quickly than if you, let's say, if you were generally good at logical thinking, but you went in and took the test cold without any prep, without having gotten used to it at all, you'd be wasting a lot of time looking at things that aren't going to help you answer the question, things like that.
mhm.
And so the test is very uh, coachable because of the way that they have their own way of getting at these particular skills. And when you get used to how they get at it, then you can answer the questions more efficiently.
It almost feels like, just understanding it this way, it almost does feel like to me that maybe people who do well on the GMAT Focus edition will have an advantage over somebody who, say, does well on the GRE, because the business school might just say, well, the student has, like you said, skills that are more general, but this student has demonstrated skills that are more specific to what, will help them excel in our program. So that's an interesting, it will be interesting to see what happens there, I think.
Yeah, the ETS, the way that they frame it is that the skills that they test on their exam are higher level critical reasoning. So even though it's a more universal test that could be used for anthropology, it could be used for, chemistry, art history, that they feel, and the business schools obviously feel, that the GRE is testing some of this higher reasoning. But I think your argument is exactly what GMAC wants to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That more students will take the test because it'll make them more successful. Interesting. Okay, we
I
have
think there is a closer match. Honestly, it's just my opinion, but I think there is a closer match between the GMAT and business thinking. Even though many of the questions don't directly ask about business scenarios, like a person might be reading a passage about dinosaurs or something like that. But the particular way that you have to break it down is very similar to taking apart a business proposal or looking at a business case study, things like that.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I have a question in the chat. I don't know if you know the answer, but I will ask it. How will business schools assess quant and verbal scores individually, as now it is out of 800?
It's currently also out of 800. So I suspect, and this was actually brought up in the prior question, I suspect that ultimately you're going to get 3 different scores plus a cumulative score. I just don't know I don't know if it's going to be each a third will count, or that, like, will one be weighted more than the others? I just know that there is a cumulative score, and there currently is also, and you'll also get those individual breakdowns of a number probably. But they haven't shared that yet.
Okay. Okay. Let me just go to some other questions. I don't see any more in the chat. Hold on. Okay. So, okay, I think you've answered the question I had about, how to prepare. I think you're saying you can use the current sort of the test prep, the preparation materials that are already GMAC is publishing. Do you think, sorry?
Well, I will say that yes, you want to use the materials that are totally available. And I don't know if I'm jumping in too fast, but you also want to, and this is a really good demonstration of your own business reasoning skills, that you also want to see where you need to improve. Right? You don't want to, there's courses that are out there that are amazing. They've got incredible material. And I hear from students who are like, I've spent the last 8 months going through this material. And you really want to think of yourself as your own test case of, well, where do you need to improve? What do you need to actually do better in? Because it's your time, it's resources, it's your energy, it's your focus. Like, you want to take the test, not let the test take you. And because there is so much information available and materials available from third-party sources, that a lot of it's amazing. Some of it's but a lot of it's amazing. You really want to take a diagnostic and see exactly where you stand with starting out. Take 2 diagnostics. If you do amazing, take another one and make sure that it wasn't a fluke. But you want to see exactly where your weak areas are and then hone in on them. And that's exactly what a business leader and professional would do, right? They wouldn't say, I'm going to do, soup to nuts. If you need to do soup to nuts, then yes, then do that. But I think it's important to recognize that everyone who's coming in they have their own formula of what they need to do to improve.
And I just want to underscore what you mentioned earlier, Bara, about reading speed being one of the things that people should check. Um, when I talked about how people sometimes, frequently, make a mistake of focusing on irrelevant details or looking all over the passage because they don't pick up on the clues of where the question is trying to send you in the passage, there's a related thing, and that is that um, some people mistakenly believe that if they're reading at less than 300 words per minute, that means they're reading carefully and that they're really looking at everything and really taking it all in. But the reality is, if you drop very much below 300, the odds are that you're actually going so slowly that you're not making all the connections between ideas. Like, you're looking at one thing at a time, but you're not linking it all together because you're actually going a little too slowly to get, or maybe a lot too slowly to get the whole thing, to get the whole picture. There's a seemingly paradoxical thing, but it isn't really a paradox. You actually need to go fast enough to understand everything. Otherwise, it becomes, well, if I could use an analogy, kind of like if you're shopping in a grocery store and you don't get a cart, and so you start just putting things in your arms until it starts falling out again, and you're dropping things. Reading too, quote unquote, slowly and carefully actually means you start dropping ideas from your awareness rather than hooking them all together. So when people are taking diagnostics and so forth, I think checking reading speed should be part of it too.
I'm going to build on that. It's also like going into a grocery store and looking at each item in the row instead of saying like, oh, here's the coffee, here are the spices, here's the fruit, right? You're actually also, you're just seeing each of the trees instead of the forest.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very helpful, actually, to just, I think, understand really clearly why this reading speed and reading and the connections and all that is so important. And I think a lot of people are really strong in quant, and they really struggle to kind of put together the verbal section, so that the sort of get as far in the verbal section. So it's really helpful. I am just going to ask you one last question. I don't think we have any more questions from the viewers. No. Okay. So my last question is, test, and I know this is right up your alley, so I want to ask it. Test day jitters are common and can negatively impact performance. What advice can you offer test takers who are nervous or anxious about taking the new GMAT Focus edition?
Anxiety is real, and it's probably not the first time that anyone has felt anxiety, and tests are not only measuring what you know, they're also measuring how well you take tests. So really, you want to address it directly. You don't want to blow it off. You don't want to minimize it. If you're feeling jitters about the test or about a section of the test, you want to identify what are the symptoms, how is it showing up for you, and how are you going to get over it? And there's so many different ways that you can move past test anxiety and the jitters. And you might already have some of those coping skills, but you want to identify what's actually going on. Do you have negative self beliefs, negative self talk, and then you want to reverse those. What you're about to do is become a business leader. So whatever jitters you have about the test, they're going to come up if you don't deal with them as a business professional when you're giving presentations and other aspects. So really, it's about figuring out for yourself, if you have the symptom, how do you get rid of it? We use a multitude of different techniques, drawing from hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming and meditation and sound therapy, binaural beats, yoga. I mean, our clients, like, once we know what the issue is, we actually actively address it. We're actually one of the only, if not the only, test prep company that actually uses all of these skill sets. And we've been doing this since I've been doing it, before I opened up the company, because I really felt that the 4 pillars of success are the content, the skills and strategy, time management, and mindset. So it's really to not discount the discomfort that you feel, but address it head on with real actionable tools. Like, we've got an audio course that people can use. Our Mind Flow program has a whole mindset channel that folks can use. And draw from your own background. What has helped you assuage any of those jitters when you felt them in the past? And if it hasn't worked, then work with a professional on it.
I think it's really helpful, especially for, because I know you prepare, people for testing, all kinds of testing. So, this is really helpful also for high schoolers, for anyone who's out there, and thinking of, that they're having self-limiting thoughts. And I think what's happened in COVID is, because of test optional policies that were around for so long, people just said, oh, I'm going to just not take the test. But as you said, that doesn't get rid of the issue, actually. So
it doesn't get rid of the issue. And just because a school is test optional doesn't mean you shouldn't take it. A school is not going to give you the option to do something if they're not going to look at it. So if they're giving you the option to put your best self forward on these exams, it's a great opportunity to shine. And if you look statistically, even if a school is test optional, they're still accepting more people that have put in their test scores.
Right. Okay, actually, there is one more question, and I would like to ask you, because we have a few more minutes. And maybe you have as helpful advice for this question. For someone who's weak at quant, what would you suggest for the starting steps should be? I did a diagnostic test and got 340 and felt disappointed.
The first thing I'll say is adopt a growth mindset. Okay, a growth mindset is a way of thinking that this is just an awesome opportunity to learn and grow and change, right? This is a great opportunity. It's like, awesome, you got a 340. That's the lowest you're ever going to get. Like that, like really like embrace that that's where you're at and that you're only going to get better. Then you want to look at that scoring and how you performed and really look at what is not there. It's probably foundational things. If you're at that level, there's foundational math that you probably haven't. In the United States, people learn this in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. I don't know when they're learning it in India. So
4th,
5th. What'd you say?
4th or 5th grade.
Exactly. So you have to give yourself a break, because this is material you haven't seen since you were in 4th or 5th grade. And so if you can just kind of, accept and love yourself up that, like, oh, wow, so I haven't done this since 4th and 5th grade. Let me really kind of go back and understand what I need to do, and take the opportunity to move through it in a very methodical way of learning, practicing, integrating, right? Like, you want to learn and understand, practice and integrate, and build yourself up through it that way.
Right. That's great advice. Okay. Any closing thoughts, words that you, Dr. Karen or Bara, you would like to share with the audience before we close? Just for the audience to know, we will send you a follow-up email with some of the resources that Bara shared earlier in her deck, and you can get in touch with her about anything test prep related, and you can get in touch with us on any of these handles here that is sort of application support related. So yeah.
I mean, there's so much to say, but everyone is going to have their own path in how they're going to prepare for the test. Some people are going to do great DIY, and some people need to have someone who can fine tune their efforts, and really coming to terms with what's, group courses, online courses. There's so much available to improve your score, to figure out what's going to work best for you and what your timing is like and what your resources are like. If you could work, you might have to work with a tutor 10 hours, which you get the same amount on an online course in 100 hours, right? So it's all really measuring what you need and addressing it, how you best learn, addressing it, and really see yourself as that individual to figure out how you're going to manifest your best performance.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, it's there's so much more information. There's so many more questions people have, and there's so many more ways of looking at this that we can keep on discussing. But I will close with that. And again, encourage everyone to get in touch with you with those additional, or me with additional questions about the process.
Yeah, we really only do individualized tutoring, and then we have the MindFlow speed reading platform, which is, within 3 to 5 hours, you can increase your reading speed and comprehension. And it's a great program, but figure out what you need, and feel free absolutely to get in touch with me and with City Test Prep. And, we have an evaluation that we do for people with diagnostic material to let them know what we think they need to do to improve. That's a great resource. The reading speed test is a great resource. But don't be completely enamored when you see so much material and so many resources, because you don't want to short circuit, right? You want to do what you need. That's what I would say.
That's great advice. I think that's really, really important. Thank you. Thank you both for joining us. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and good night to everyone who's here from India or Asia. And we will look forward to following up with everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.